That the contemporary state of polarization in American politics is viewed as a matter of grave concern cannot be in doubt. There are scores of academic articles and hundreds of journalistic essays condemning polarization. And there are now multiple books on the topic. According to the Stanford law professor and political scientist Nathaniel Persily, in the introduction to Solutions to Political Polarization in America, quote, "Political polarization dominates discussions of contemporary American politics," end quote. And there is, quote, "widespread agreement that the dysfunction in the political system can be attributed to political polarization," end quote. But political polarization has not always been characteristic of American politics. A famous report from a committee of the American Political Science Association in 1950 called for a more responsible two-party system. As summarized by Arthur Schlesinger, Jr. in his review of the report in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science, quote, "The committee's objective is to transform the present sprawling and illogical system into a centralized and logical system which will define alternative policies with clarity and will guarantee their execution through improved means of party discipline," end quote. One could say that this ambition has now been fulfilled. But it is also well known that getting what one wishes for can be dangerous, as Schlesinger also states eloquently in the same review. We now have widely separated and internally homogeneous political camps, each responsible to its respective base. But unfortunately, our politics is beset with gridlock, obstruction, and the inability to compromise to get things done. In this book, we highlight polarization in Congress and focus primarily on the first of these three aspects of polarization identified by Persily, namely, quote, "ideological convergence within parties and divergence between parties," end quote, which he calls hyper-partisanship. But we recognize that polarization can be viewed as a multi-stranded concept, and that sometimes it is hard to distinguish the presence of polarization from its consequences. Section 1.2, Measuring Polarization in the U.S. Congress. We begin with a definition. Legislative polarization is the ideological gap between Democratic and Republican ideologies, which is quantified as the difference between the mean ideological positions of the Democratic and Republican delegations in Congress, and in particular within the U.S. House, along with the intra-party variations within each of the delegations. To be specific, our primary measure of the degree of legislative polarization in the U.S. Congress is the difference, assessed in terms of roll call voting patterns, between the mean policy/ideological positions of the Republican and Democratic delegations in a one-dimensional spatial model. In this book, we focus primarily on the U.S. House of Representatives.